Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope that this tech stuff worked itself out smoothly in class. Sorry I'm not there today. I am in the beautiful Seymour, Missouri, which I hope to see more than I have so far. But hey, the day is young. You see, we're in a quality establishment. You can tell by the curtains that they keep their stuff pretty well updated with the trends. We're going to be in 1 Samuel again this week, chapter 24 this time. So the curriculum has jumped really far ahead from where we were when David killed Goliath in our lesson last week. Since then, it's kind of been a pretty interesting situation with Saul and David's relationship because, he basically had David play the harp for him and such while he was going through like his mental anguish and struggles. And then, he showed up and defeated Goliath. He continued to serve Saul in that capacity of being like his emotional support harpist. So it's kind of an interesting relationship that they have. So David has continued to go on and do battle for Saul after Saul has witnessed some of his capabilities and even asked his servants at one point. They're like, well, whose son is this? Like, he never inquired about who he really was before whenever he had him in his house playing the harp for him. And now that Saul has seen him become successful in other things, he takes a little more interest in him. So he puts him in charge of several of his armies, and he essentially becomes like a general for him and does really well in battle. They're constantly fighting with the Philistines, just off and on. At some point, there became songs that I think it said like women would sing about Saul has slain his thousands and David has slain his 10,000s, which was sort of a hot button for Saul, because he was not big on sharing the spotlight since he was king, the first king, and anointed in such a way that he felt like no one should ever be considered equal to him. And in these scenarios, David was actually being considered like higher than Saul, or celebrated more so because of what he did through his military leadership and conquering and defeating so many of the Philistine armies. Saul becomes, I don't know, at first I thought like bipolar would be maybe a diagnosis that you would give him, but it sort of grows into paranoid schizophrenia when you watch how his actions are, because he becomes so frustrated with David while David's in his own home, like often. And we read about in the few chapters before 24, how Saul would sit there with a spear in his hand, like in his own house, surrounded by servants and guards, and in the presence of all of his family and his military leaders. And he's holding a spear the whole time. And so at one point, like, he threatens to kill David and throws the spear and like hits the wall. And so, of course, David takes off and goes into hiding. And Saul's son, Jonathan, is David's, they're super good friends. And so Jonathan's kind of his inside man, saying, hey, don't worry, I'm going to talk to my dad. We're going to work all this out. And, at one point when David was in hiding, Jonathan is out with Saul, his dad, and says, why do you want to kill him? You realize, like, he's the one that calms your nerves and played the harp for you. And he defeated Goliath, and then everyone celebrated, which only helped your cause because you beat the Philistines that day. Like, they all ran off and you were able to chase them and kill them. It was a great victory for you that David served you doing that. And so he said, yeah, you're right. I think everything's fine with us. And so Jonathan tells David, okay, you can come back to my dad's house. We're in good shape. He realizes now that you're on his team and that you're good to go. And so they continue on like that, but that feeling comes back to Saul, and he continues to struggle with his hate of David. Like, getting rid of David and people celebrating him in Saul's mind would make himself even greater, because there's no competition. You're not comparing him to anyone else. And he can maintain his kingship without worrying about his successor, who apparently is right in front of him being celebrated already. It doesn't work out too well for him. So, he goes back to kind of his same old ways, throws the spear at David again. David takes off again, and he's in hiding. And at a point, David sort of amasses his own army of folks who are in debt that they can't pay back within the Israelites. And so they go find David, and they kind of want to hang with him so they can escape the problems from their own homes or their own towns. And some of the derelicts, I think, was one of the terms that one of the versions that I read through called them. So you kind of have the misfits out there with David, and they're up to 400 at some point as they're sort of in hiding. And there's all kinds of stuff that goes on with this, with Saul going to go look for him and then not. And then it shows like David's still his captain or still one of the generals in his army. It's just so back and forth, it gets confusing. And then I realized it was confusing because of how Saul is just up and down, whether or not he wants him dead or whether or not he understands, yeah, you know what, he's not the worst thing in the world. He's helping us. He's doing a good job. And it would show like at one point, David would still go occupy a seat at the new moon. I didn't do much research on that. Like they would have these regular feasts. And David still had his seat there that he was expected to be there for, regardless of the things that Saul had done to try to take his life from him. And so at one point, Jonathan talked to David, and David's like, I can't go back. I can't be in there. Like, I'm tired of dodging spears. So he's afraid his luck was going to run out at one point. And so Jonathan says, well, hey, if you want to go back to Bethlehem and hide, or I'll tell him that that's where you went, and I'll tell my dad that I told you it was okay. Like, I gave you a pass to take care of some stuff that you needed to do there if you want to miss this official feast that you're supposed to attend all the time at my dad's house. So he does that. And of course, Saul looks and sees that he's not there, and he inquires about it. And Jonathan explains to his father, like, hey, he had some stuff to take care of, and don't worry, I told him it was okay. Well, this just infuriates Saul. And so he calls him a son of some other words derogatory about his mom. But he didn't, I guess, remember that he was just as much as at fault for creating Jonathan as Jonathan's mom was. So now Saul's upset with Jonathan too, and he's realized that he's sort of taken sides with David. And not exactly Saul's idea of having a son that's got his own house as his top priority. So David is out and he's in hiding. Interesting thing, while he was there, at this point, like, his band of merry men has grown to 600 out there in hiding and going into other towns, because every time he would come into a town, because he had such a large entourage, word would end up back to Saul saying, hey, David's here or David's there. So Saul would send people after David. And at one point, in the story, Saul even gave David one of his daughters to marry. Like, he offered him one. David was like, I'm not of royal lineage. Like, there's no reason for me to marry into the royal family because I'm not from that. And then Saul said, hey, look, don't worry, we're not looking for any money or any dowry, which I expect would be like from his family for being able to marry into this kingdom. And Saul said, no, just give me 100 pieces of circumcision, I guess is the best way to put it, from the Philistines. And so, David was like, okay. So he brought those back and then was able to marry one of Saul's daughters that actually loved David. So, while they're out running and hiding, at one point, or while he's running away from Saul, he sent for David, and his wife, who's Saul's daughter, had made up like a dummy in the bed and told him, oh no, he's sick. And so he tells his servants, Saul tells his servants, well, just bring the whole bed here and then I'll just kill him while he's still in it. And then he finds out that, of course, that it was just a dummy in there, and he's upset with his daughter now. Like, why would you do that to me? Like, I'm your dad, and this is your kingdom. I mean, like, he doesn't even grasp the amount of ridiculousness that he has kind of exhibited to everyone else. So anyway, David's crew has grown to like 600. At one point, I'm trying to think of the name of Keali or something. This town that was being attacked by the Philistines, and David got word and was like, am I supposed to go fight them? Because, technically, like, I'm in hiding. And God told him, he says, yeah, you need to go fight these people. You need to protect the folks that are there. And so David does, and he destroys them. And he destroys the Philistines. And of course, Saul hears, well, David's there because he just fought this battle. And Saul's like, perfect, let's go get him. And the people of the city that he just saved, they gave him up. They're like, yep, he's here, take him, because they fear the king more so than they fear David. And more so, apparently, than they appreciated the fact that David saved all of their lives from being taken over by the Philistines. So, you never know what people are going to do, I guess. So this kind of stuff continues on for, again, several chapters since we first started seeing David interact with Saul. The lesson this week, though, is, again, it's in chapter 24 in 1 Samuel. And it reads, after Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the desert of En-Gedi. And so Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. So if you think about it, this was kind of foreshadowed whenever the people of Israel started asking for a king. And the Lord sort of told Samuel to point out that, like, if you get yourself a king, you're going to take everything that it comes with, like them picking and choosing the best men of your nation and taking them to war. And this is an example of that happening way further in the future. So it says in verse 3 that he came to the sheep pens along the way, and a cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. And David and his men were far back in the cave, and the men said, this is the day that the Lord spoke of, when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands, for you deal with him as you wish. Then David crept up and unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hands on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. And with these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. And then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, saying, my lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. And he said to Saul, why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. And I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of the robe, but didn't kill you. And so he sat there. So see that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. And may the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me. But my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. If we stop right there, he's basically saying, as you guys know, like, I could have killed you and I didn't. You're still the Lord's anointed. And David did not receive instruction saying to kill Saul. And I love that this many thousands of years ago, they considered it an old saying, like, from evildoers come evil deeds. So even though the deed would have been technically justified, it was still an evil deed. And there's oftentimes we could justify our actions because of something that happened to us. And it would be technically, we can justify our reactions because someone else caused us harm or intended to cause us harm. And in order to protect ourselves, we did the evil thing. I mean, justified or not, it doesn't change the fact that that response is evil. And that's kind of where David is in this. And it goes on to say in verse 14, against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? A dead dog or a flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us, and may he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. And when David finished saying this, Saul asked, is that your voice, David, my son? Again, I think he's kind of mentally not all there. And he wept aloud. And this is when Saul said something interesting. He says, you're more righteous than I, he said. You've treated me well, but I've treated you badly. You've just now told me about the good you did to me, and the Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. And when a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? And may the Lord reward you well for the way you've treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family. And we talked about that several times, that this long ago, all they had was how their name would be remembered, and their lineage was sort of top priority. And Saul is just asking, like, Saul's coming and recognizing, like, you're going to be the king and you're going to be better than me. I would just ask that you would respect my family, my family's name, and not let it be reflected negatively. And of course, what Saul didn't realize, because, the Spirit of the Lord had left him several years before this, that it wouldn't be David's history to write, that this is God's history to write. And when we read through this Bible, this is not David's version of what had happened. This is the truth. This was given to us in fact, like from an omniscient point of view. And this story of David is oftentimes kind of left out, because we want to talk about, when we first see David and he's the chosen one, the shepherd boy, that he killed Goliath, and then that he's the man after God's own heart. He's a great military leader when he becomes king. And of course, we talk oftentimes about Bathsheba and some of the other little issues like that David had. But this one kind of gets forgotten. I think that David had an opportunity to take care of Saul on his own, and instead he sat back and went, you know what? No matter what he tries, or no matter what bad decisions that he's made, God still anointed him as king, which makes him legitimate. I have to act better than that, or potentially I will be the next Saul. And who's to say that, like, the weight that kingdom or that crown carries doesn't make you crazy, like it obviously made Saul crazy. And David, I feel like in his own wisdom, saw that was a potential, and he had to be better. And he told his men that they all had to be better and that they wouldn't take his life. So I appreciate this story very much. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to get questions and feedback, but I do appreciate it, and I enjoyed doing it this way too. Because I don't want to miss out on this opportunity to study this story and to get to tell it sort of in my own way, which I enjoy very much. So thank you guys for watching. If someone will lead in prayer to close out the class, and we'll see you. Will we see you next week? No, we won't see you next week. Lori and I will be Mexicans the Sunday after this is being aired. So anyway, have a great evening, a great day, great lunch. It's evening for me. Bye, guys.